Well, good evening and welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dram Antics Society. Tonight I'm going to be doing a tasting of a whiskey you don't see a lot about. It's Balmenach. We're going to taste three independent bottlings of Balmenach. We have Scottish Malt Whisky Society Cask 48.119, Balmenach 13-year-old, 57.2%, prosaically named Kissing a Scarecrow. Then we have a Gordon and MacPhail Connoisseur's Choice Balmenach 2009, 11-year-old, bottled at 46%. And then finally a new for August 2024 from the Authentic Collection, the new release of CADENHEAD'S BALMENACH-GLENLIVET, 12-year-old, distilled in 2012, which was in an Amontillado Cask since 2020, bottled at 56.5%. So Balmenach Distillery was founded by James McGregor in 1924. At the beginning, it was a small farmer's distillery with the aim of preserving their barley in the form of whiskey. In 1897, the distillery was bought by Glenlivet Limited, and in 1830, the owner changed again. Sorry, in 1930, the owner changed again, and now it belonged to Scottish Malt Distillers Limited. In 1962, the production was increased and another two stills were set up. After the first official distillery bottling was issued in 1991, the distillery closed in 1993. Then in 1997, the Inverhouse company bought Balmenach and started production again in 1998. Balmenach Distillery can produce 1.8 million litres of spirit per year. The water comes from different water sources in the Cromdale Hills. Balmenach has 3 wash stills and 3 spirit stills. All of them are built in a row and are very beautiful to look at. All the stills have a reflux bowl, and the neck of the still is very high. The line arm is falling after the bend. The height and the reflux bowl allow the spirits to separate very well and create the smooth Balmenach distillery character. Balmenach is one of the very few distilleries left in Scotland which still perform a triple distillation. The malt of the Balmenach distillery is always unpeated. There are old malting floors, but they have been closed since 1962. Balmenach, although most of it goes in, well, basically all of it, apart from that goes to independent bottlers, goes into blends. They use a lot of sherry casks for maturation. Most of them are hogsheads, or some are normal sherry butts. The whiskies of Balmenach are rather fruity and unpeated, which is very typical for a Speyside whisky. But there have only been a very few distillery bottlings. A major part of the bottling that you can source is done by independent bottlers like Gordon and MacPhail or Douglas Lang. Most of it goes into blends, most importantly for Inverhouse, Hankey Bannister. The fermentation is long, the stills relatively small and run quickly, and the vapour runs into worm tubs rather than shell and tube condensers. This helps to produce a slow maturing new make character, which is rich and meaty, ideal for adding weight and grunt to blends. And it's also a good match with ex-sherry casks. Inverhouse has no plans to release this highly distinctive whisky as a single malt. The reason for this is that the whisky, whose style is unusual these days, is too highly prized as fillings for blends, both by Inverhouse and other firms. So, first whisky we're going to try tonight is a Scottish Malt Whisky Society cask, 48.119. If you look at a Scottish Malt Whisky Society bottle, you'll see that there is a Society cask number. The first two numbers, 48, sometimes 3, 48, you can find out that's a distillery reference, and in this case it's Balmenach. And 119 is the number of bottlings they've done, so number of casks they've bottled from that distillery. So this one, 48 Balmenach, 119, and this is a 13-year-old, 57.2%, kissing a scarecrow, and it was matured in a refill ex-bourbon barrel. So I'm going to talk a little bit with each of these Balmenachs, what we would expect from the maturation process. So bourbon comes from the USA. To be more precise, this whisky originally comes from the Bourbon County of the same name in Kentucky. But nowadays, bourbon can be produced anywhere in the USA. The most important aspects of bourbon production are the fresh American white oak barrels, the toasting and charring of the barrels, and the mash bill. This mash bill is the exact composition of the grain used in the production. And it's basically nothing more than a list of ingredients for the fermentation process in the whisky production. The high proportion of corn in the bourbon gives the subsequent whisky maturing in the barrel afterwards a sweeter character. This would not be possible with a whisky that, as is common in Scotland, is made in high proportions or even 100% from barley. There are numerous brands of bourbon with different mash bills, each of which achieves different flavours. The difference lies mainly in the rye content. This is because the rye gives the bourbon its much appreciated spiciness and full-bodiedness. So the way the maturation in ex-bourbon barrels affects the whisky maturation is a four-part process. Firstly, the new wood of the barrel influences the taste of the whisky. American white oak is a very mild wood. It contains few tannins, which makes for a softer and milder taste. The second aspect in terms of flavour is the toasting of the barrel. Toasting is a heat treatment process that affects substances in the wooden staves of the barrel. The wood sugars in the oak are heated to 150 degrees centigrade, which causes them to caramelize. This is one of the main influences in the barrel aging of bourbon, and bourbon gets its typical caramel and vanilla flavours from this. However, the wood sugars are not completely dissolved in the bourbon, so some of them also find their way into the subsequent Scotch whisky that's put in the barrels after the bourbon. The charring of the barrel is a third important aspect in this respect. The barrels are burnt out on the inside so that a layer of charcoal forms on the barrel wall. The fire is extinguished with water to prevent the charcoal from burning to ash. The charcoal can actively bind other substances via its large surface area. The charcoal reacts mainly with the pungent and intense flavour components that are produced during the distilling process of bourbon. However, the filtering effect of the charcoal layer wears off over the maturation period. This subtractive maturation, as it is known in the trade, also softens the whisky. The last aspect is closely related to the other influencing factors: the length of time the bourbon is matured in the barrel. A normal bourbon that has been matured for a few years and is sold without an age statement will leach a cask significantly less than, for example, an Elijah Craig 18-year-old with its long maturation period. For the maturation of the subsequent whisky after the bourbon has been emptied, it's important with which alcohol strength the bourbon came into the barrel. Alcohol is a far better solvent and flavour carrier than water. A bourbon like Maker's Mark is filled into the barrel at a low alcohol strength and therefore does not leach out of the barrel as quickly as a high-proof White Dog raw whisky. Anyone who thinks that Maker's Mark has less flavour is wrong. Maker's Mark does not have to be diluted as much during bottling, which leads to a stronger taste. The higher the alcohol content of the bourbon in the barrel, the fewer flavours from toasting and charring remain in the barrel for the later whisky. The raw whisky is colourless, but it comes out of the cask golden. This means that the entire colour of the whisky comes from the cask. In the process, some of the colour compounds remain in the cask and are passed on to the subsequent whisky. So this one was distilled on the 28th of February 2007 and matured for 13 years in a refill ex-bourbon barrel before bottling in 2020, producing 184 bottles. (57.2%). This is cask strength, non-chill filtered and naturally coloured, as are all Scottish Malt Whisky Society bottlings. It's 13 years old and it's very pale in colour, you can see. A sort of straw, lightly golden colour. Let's see. And it has good tears, nice tears on this. And I find this to be much lighter initially than I've come to expect from this distillery. It's very crisp and cereal driven with some ethereal fruitiness, almost like vitamin tablets fizzing in mineral water. And mango peel and a sort of lemon ironing water. And lots of starch linens. There's a turmeric earthiness and things like lanolin, lemon pith, and wee hints of pickled ginger. It's a lean and almost brittle nose, full of crisp, dry cereals, turmeric, soda bread, cigarette rolling papers, beeswax and lamp oil. It's elegant, refined and complex. We'll try them out. And it's initially rich and oily, Sweeter than the nose would have suggested. Lemon, barley water, mineral oils, cinnamon biscuits, some toasted fennel seed, rosehip tea, and dried wildflowers. It's a satisfyingly full-bodied melt of waxes, putty, olive oil, grass, clay, and mineral oils. Some dunnage earthiness underlying everything. It becomes more herbal. Dried sage, sorrel, and some fragrant sandalwood. It's wonderfully savoury with sunflower oil, aniseed, and sun lotion. And the finish is medium long, and somewhat bitter and drying in the end. And the honey battles the oaky bitterness, and the minty citrus slowly fades away. I'm going to try 4 drops of water in this. Oh, they actually added 5. And you get a lovely Scotch mist here. Water brings out cooking oils, scented candles, hessian, potpourri, and bouquet garni of dried herbs. Some incense drifting in the background. Becomes more herbal with dried sage, sorrel, and that fragrant sandalwood again. It is wonderfully savoury. Try the mouth. And water adds bergamot, Madeira sponge, things like Darjeeling tea, vanilla cream, and dried out aged dessert wines. Olive oil, sooty notes, malt beer, heather, flowers, hessian, and waxier notes of camphor and wood polish. And with what, due to the very oily texture, it's a relatively long, creamy finish. It's a beautiful Balmenach, which by its status as an absolute rarity, it scores this one. This is an exciting Balmenach. It makes me curious as to why it is never bottled as a single malt by the distillery. I'm going to cleanse my palate with a Nairn's mini oatcake. So next up, we have a Gordon MacPhail Connoisseur's Choice Balmenach from 2009. This is an 11-year-old bottled at 46%. So this one was bottled on the 16th of November 2009 and bottled on the 31st of May 2021. So 11 years old. It was fully matured in a first fill sherry hogshead. Cask number 1860341, 111 bottles and bottled at a strength of 46%. So it's been watered down a bit, this one, I think, from its cask strength. So a little bit about Oloroso sherry maturation. Originating in southwestern Spain, Oloroso sherry is a fortified wine with an alcohol content of 17 to 22% and a sugar content of 0 to 5 grams per litre, which classifies it as a dry wine. However, sherry is often sweetened to make it juicier and syrupier. Among wine connoisseurs, Oloroso is considered a very nutty sherry with dark aromas. Sherry matures in oak barrels, which today are mostly made of the American white oak Quercus alba, although there is still a lot of European oak used also. The age range extends from sherries with no age indication to 30 years of maturation. Oloroso is not produced by natural fermentation alone. After alcoholic fermentation, the sherry is fortified by adding brandy. The alcohol content must be raised to over 17%, which prevents the yeast from forming a white pile on the sherry in the barrel. Thus, Oloroso sherry matures oxidatively. Many sherries are produced using the Solera method. Several rows of barrels are stacked on top of each other, with the bottom row containing the oldest sherry. Some of the old casks are now filled and topped up with sherry from the next younger cask, which in turn is topped up with sherry from the row above, while the new sherry is poured into the top cask. Whiskey matured in ex-Oloroso sherry casks usually picks up the nuttiness and dark flavours such as those of figs, sultanas and other fruits. Most whiskey connoisseurs also find Oloroso matured whiskies to be oilier and smoother than other whiskies. Oloroso is very dark after maturation. This also leads to a darker colour in whiskey, which is usually welcomed as an aesthetic thing. In the sherry industry, however, the dark colour is not always intentional. The Bristol Cream brand, for example, is said to lighten its sherry by carbon filtration. This process is also used at Jack Daniels, where the raw spirit is filtered before maturation, not to lighten it, but to make it softer. Most whiskies only receive an Oloroso finish. Only a few mature for the full time in such casks. Whiskies that mature for more than 10 years in Oloroso casks are usually very intense and almost more reminiscent of a liqueur than of whiskey. This one has been 11 years in a first fill sherry hogshead. So what have we got here? It starts fresh, fruity and quite apple toned. Dates and baked apple lead to ginger and nutmeg. Then you get grass and doughy aromas, like a stollen dough. And then it becomes spicy. But it's a fine fruity nose with focus on ripe red apples and orange peel. And the fruit is covered in a blanket of wild herbs. After a while, in addition to the fruit notes, you get some floral aromas. And some vanilla completes an elegant nose. Overall, it's quite interesting. Later, a bit metallic and almost reminiscent of cocktail sherries. Very pleasant. We'll try them out. First of all, you get grass, mineral tones, and a lot of hay. But then sweet forest fruits combined with milk chocolate and toffee. And only then do you get some sherry, cream soda, a bit of oak, earthy accents, and quite a bit of pepper. I would say the creamy flavours dominate. The orange peel and blossom, vanilla oak from the beginning, and maturing. It's only 11 years old, but it's done well with the sherry cask here. Raisins and milk chocolate give the malt a nice depth. And the milk chocolate turns to dark chocolate after a while. And a touch of pepper pulls through the palate. And the finish is long. Oak, grass, cream soda. It's a bit dry, but it leaves a creamy oak, orange, fruity taste on the tongue. Medium body finish with lingering fruit. Some spices at the end of the mouth. Crushed black pepper, perhaps. I'll try 4 drops of water in this. Yeah, there's a nice Scotch mist in this one. Still lovely tears. And it becomes fruitier with a little water. It's slightly old-fashioned, a strong, nutty sherry tones. And there is a hint of sulphur. Buttery pastry, warm croissants, along with dried apricots and that sort of polished wood, some sherry notes coming through with the water. We'll try them out. And with water, a thick, syrupy sweetness mingles with cinnamon and buttered toast. And on the finish, a charred oak lingers nicely with caramelized nuts and orchard fruits. So this one is a space cider that, even with only 11 years maturation, scores with a great oak note. I think it's decent enough. I thought its eccentricity was going to put me off, but it's one of those outliers that works. Over time, the elements that seem to clash come together and form a soft, jammy whiskey with integrated salt and biscuit vibes, moving to that sort of bitter, sour finish. And the mustiness soon falls away, and you're left with something enjoyable. I'll cleanse my palate again. Well, this third one, I've only got a tiny little sample of. I can't tell you the cask number. It's from. It's not going to be released as a bottle until August the 2nd. I'm reviewing this on the 27th of July, 2024. So this one's from CADENHEAD'S August release of the Authentic collection. It's a CADENHEAD'S BALMENACH-GLENLIVET, 12-year-old, distilled in 2012 and finished in an Amontillado Cask since 2020, bottled at 56.5%. So I only have 2 CLs of this one. We'll see how we do. So Amontillado comes from the Montilla region in Spain and stands quasi between the Fino and the Oloroso. In German, Amontillado means in the manner of those of Montilla. With 70% volume alcohol and a sugar content of 5 grams per litre, Amontillado sherry is classified as a dry wine. Amontillado begins its aging process as a normal Fino sherry. It has a normal pile layer that's a sort of foam. But this is destroyed at some point during the maturation, which starts the oxidation process. This can happen in 2 ways. Either you spritz the wine to at least 16% volume, adding alcohol to it, or you do it the natural way by waiting. After about 12 years, the pile layer begins to die off on its own. The non-sprayed Amontillado is often called real Amontillado. An Amontillado cask delivers sweet, nutty, and dry flavours. Between Fino and the sweeter Oloroso sherry in terms of the flavours it delivers. The sherry gives the whiskey a dark colour, not quite as intense or dark as Oloroso or Pedro Jimenez, but beautifully amber and golden. There's not that many Amontillado finishes on the market, as only small quantities of this type of sherry are produced, which naturally means that only a few casks are left for the whiskey industry. So what have we got here? Well, honey, old leather, dill and prunes, lemon peel, orange zest, almonds and whole nutmeg. I get the cola, the hazelnuts, and the chocolate orange bubblegum. There's clear, fresh sherry influences in combination of wood notes and spiciness. It opens straight away. It's very intense on the nose. The sour notes predominate. Vanilla, wet wipes. There's a sort of artificial citrus note, like almost like a citrus cleanser. Apricots, peaches, malt, caramel, a touch of nugget and roasted hazelnuts. We'll try them out. It's a powerful start. Tingles in the mouth. It's got a creamy body, and it's more on the sour side again. Vanilla, orange peel. There's a little sulphur, drain pipe and fuses. A sort of nugget chocolate, oak spice. It's almost like a diluted orange, toffee and fresh nugget. And you get more almonds, walnuts, and a wisp of smoke. Zesty, Parma violets, licorice, and buttered toast. Buttery, good density, and some old black currants and stone fruit. It's warm and spicy, and a subtle sweetness. Raisins, plum, almond slivers, hazelnuts, and nugget. And there's subtle notes of tobacco. Dark chocolate and cinnamon. And it's got a nice, nutty, fruity profile with subtle spice. Slight ginger sharpness in the second wave. Nut and fruit mix with cranberries, raisins, almonds, peanuts, and hazelnuts, walnut, tobacco. It's spicier in the mouth than on the nose. Herbs de Provence mixed with a mulled wine spice mix. And on the finish, I get tangerines, like a tobacco pouch. Nutty and orange fruit. It's medium, spicy and woody notes. Orange peel, oak, a bit of sulphur, nugget, chocolate, chocolatey, nutty. There's not many bitter notes at all. It's quite warming. I'm going to try 4 drops of water in this. And a wonderful Scotch mist forming there. So, with water, fruits and funk. Fruit salad chews, lemon oils and clementines, which provide a juicy foundation for key lime pie, and meringue, and a sort of piquant ginger extract. But sitting abreast of all that is lamp oils, lubricants, and greases. It's like you've gone into your workshop having had your dessert, and now you're in amongst the grease. Dilution retains the appealing character with custard cream biscuits and desiccated coconut added to soft wax and damp wool. This one's at 56.5%. And with water, it's still thick, oily, and notably textured. There's a real glide across the palate here. Stem ginger and wild honey join shredded wheat with chili pepper, heat building across the top of the gums and the chewy sweets. And it's all enlivened by chai latte and a dusting of cinnamon. And water retains the weight of the spirit and the spices, and adds a bung cloth and sour cream together with rose hips. The finish is medium and favours mixed fruits and chili spices. This whiskey is particularly effective, especially in terms of its vibrant nose. The palate, on the other hand, is more subdued and less focused on the Balmenach distillery output. It would satisfy anyone seeking a sherried whiskey that stands out from the rest of the market, as it offers a pleasant change in a world dominated by strong and one-dimensional sherry casks, sherry bombs. And it's a delicious whiskey for cold days, I would say. So, Balmenach, 3 different maturations. You know, the fermentation is long, the stills relatively small and run quickly, and the vapor runs into warm tubs rather than shell and tube condensers, which helps to produce a slow maturing new make character which is rich and meaty, which is ideal for adding weight and grunt to the blends, and is also a good match with thick sherry casks. So, you know, they want to focus on their blends, Inverhouse blends, including Cato's Inverhouse, the quintessential Blairmore, Glendrummond, Munray, Pinwinny, and best known, of course, Hanky Bannister. But Balmenach is a hidden star that often gets overlooked by its current owners, who seem to prefer their gin, the Caron, which is a perfectly nice gin, but come on, Balmenach's not a bad whiskey either. It's a true sleeper, and it surprises even this most seasoned whiskey enthusiast. The ex-bourbon matured Scottish Malt Whisky Society 11-year-old highlighted the savoury, heavy nature of Balmenach. It's a wonderfully complex dram, but not one for fruity whiskey lovers. The 13-year-old Gordon MacPhail, fully matured ex Oloroso, adds the fruit, spice, and nuttiness, but is not a sherry bomb. And the Cadenhead Amontillado finished 12-year-old is just a very pleasant dram. So I think it's worth checking out Blairmore if you can pick it up at a reasonable price. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you again.